Good evening, everyone. This is Danny Haiphong, and you are tuning in to episode number 5 of the Internationalist Transmission. I'm going to let folks come on. We have a very special guest today, and that is Dana Burton from Detroit. He's a hip hop artist. He's been living in Shanghai for quite a while now. Our other guest, Cale Holmes, was unable to make it today. You know, there's a 13-hour difference. This is around the work period for folks. It's hard to really stamp down a time with folks who live in China. So we'll have still a great conversation with Dana. But before that, I just have an announcement I want to make next Saturday, actually. So the Biden administration is holding a summit for democracy on the 9th and 10th of December, so in 3 days. And we at Friends of Socialist China, which I co-edit, will be holding a summit for socialist democracy. And you'll want to register for that event in the description. We will have great speakers. We'll have Luna Oy. We'll have speakers from Cuba. We'll have speakers from China. We're trying to get someone from Laos to speak as well. We're going to try to cover all the bases in terms of socialist countries. But it is good to be with you this evening. Again, it's 9 p.m. here on the East Coast, and we're just going to bring Dana on as people come on. Warning, there may be a few second lag. I've had this issue with folks, where there is a lag, a connectivity issue, but we're going to try to work that out. But with no further ado, we are bringing on Dana. How you doing, Dana?
Peace and blessings. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So we got you for a good hour today, and there's been a lot of, this show is about internationalism, and I think there's no better way to become an internationalist, to understand the struggle of people all over the world against imperialism. And there's no better way to understand countries with different development systems, with different models of governance, than to actually be there. And you have been living in Shanghai for quite some time. How long have you been there again?
I've been living in the People's Republic of China for 22 years.
Okay. So that is quite the experience. I hear a little bit of like a crackle. I don't know if anyone can hear that as well.
I can hear it too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll try to work it out. It might be from your speaker. But I know hopefully this will be able to rectify itself, but we'll do our best. We gotta work what we got. But yeah, Dana, let's while you're fixing that, let's talk about, China is often portrayed in the US and in the West as bigoted, as race, especially now. I'll also be speaking at an event on Sunday of next week about China Africa, the relationship with China Africa. And there is this kind of framing of China as a colonizing country, as anti-black to the core. There's a lot of media stories that have circulated in the last few years. I remember during the beginning of COVID-19 in the West, there were stories circulating about how China treats African populations, migrant populations. And this, kind of mirrors how, let's say, Cuba is treated as well in the media. There's a lot of hyping up of race and racism in Cuba. Not unironically, given the state of the United States and its history. But I want to know your experience in China, because you've been there for so many years. And I think, US audiences don't really get, especially in the political realm and politics on the left, they don't really get to hear a voice from who lives in China, but is from the United States. You're from the Black city of Detroit. So tell me, what's been your experience like, being a Black person, Black male in China? What's it been like for you?
Well, first of all, this argument and this narrative that China is bigoted and racist is completely false. what we're seeing is pretty much the West engaging in projection, and they're projecting, what they know America to be. So they're actually projecting China to be, worse than the United States, and it's a clever strategy because most people in the United States, or a lot of particularly Black people, are deeply concerned with racism. They're very sensitive about it, and we've seen this very aggressive propaganda effort to misportray the reality of China, and it's working. It's working wonders. Many people that have never been to China, don't have any connection to China, they've seen the news reports, they hear the politicians, and they're being just bombarded with this propaganda, and they're believing in it. And this is a clear example of divide and conquer. Um, if you want to destroy a nation, if you want to weaken a nation, if you want to be in competition, well, no better way than to discredit them, disparage them, vilify them, so that you can justify, anything that comes after it. And I think that's really what we're seeing. We are not, African Americans, Black people in America, and the general public, they're not getting accurate information about the Black experience in China at all. So, we have to start from ground zero. We got to kind of clear our minds from all this negative information, and you have to start listening to the Black people in China, and hear our experience, because you'll hear something quite different. So there's, for me, there's no comparison to the type of racism and bigotry that we have in the United States in China. Anyone who makes that false equivalence, anyone who tries to compare the two, one is completely disconnected from the reality of China, and you're making some pretty egregious ahistorical claims. I came to China in 1999, and I was inspired by the radical Black tradition. I was actually inspired by, the foremost radical leaders in the Black community. Detroit is sort of like, Harlem gets a lot of attention, but the actual community where I grew up, the Dexter Davison area, we call it D Block, was home of some of the most forward-thinking and Black liberation movements and organizations that America's ever produced. So, we're home of the Nation of Islam, Temple Number 1, just a couple blocks away from my neighborhood, the Shrine of the Black Madonna, the League of the Revolutionary Black Workers,
Yes.
the Republic of New Africa. So all of these organizations, and a base for Malcolm X and some of his post-Nation of Islam activism, Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs. So we have a very rich, and the Black Panther Party, we have a very rich culture of Black intellectuals and scholars and leaders. And they gave me the inspiration to come to China. And the things that they said laid the foundation for me wanting to come to China in the first place. And I think there's a couple things that people need to know. First of all, China and the Communist Party of China and the Communist movement in general, they have a very strong anti-racist tradition. I think people need to understand that. That's something that took me a long time to understand. I wasn't even aware of how important and how central anti-racism is to the movement and to these organizations. So they have firm principles of being an anti-racist party and running an anti-racist government. That's one. Two, racism is illegal in China. It is absolutely legal, and your rights are protected by the Constitution. And three, there is recourse. So if you do find instances or cases of racial discrimination, there are channels for you to address those. And what I can say emphatically, particularly for the Black experience, the government has done a much better job than my own government in the United States when it comes to dealing with racism when it pops up.
Yeah. Well, we definitely would like to hear more about that. I mean, I think about China, and oftentimes how China is portrayed now by these think tanks, which are almost primarily funded by the Department of State, military contractors. I'm talking like Australian Strategic Policy Institute, the Jamestown Foundation. They portray China as this ethnic supremacist state where you have Han Chinese people dominating over the oppressed minorities, in particular the Uyghurs, which has been a talking point. We even have these pop culture, I don't even want to call him an icon because Enes Kanter is not a very he's not a very high profile basketball player, but he is a very politicized basketball player in that he's being used as a weapon against China, and he's very dutiful in that role. So what have you seen, and have you experienced any instances, or do you have any examples in your experience of how China deals with something that I think is a real global problem, right? I mean, China is no stranger to colonialism. It's no stranger to foreign intervention, to reactionary ideas like white supremacy. But how did, China had a socialist revolution. And as you said, fighting this kind of bigotry, fighting racism was a huge part of that. I don't know if you've read, Mao had more than a few words to say about solidarity with Black people in the United States, and China, of course, is now really centering on the African continent as part of this global shift away from Western capitalism and all of its, and all of its limitations, including hegemony and imperialism, and which is racist in nature. So, yeah, could you tell? Is there any experiences in particular that you've had that's shown you how China deals with this question of uh, this very global problem of race? Have you ever, has there been any instance where you've been like, oh wow, that's interesting. That wouldn't happen here in the United States.
Yeah, well. First, you mentioned Mao Zedong, and I think it's good to kind of provide some examples of that foundation that I'm talking about. How China is standing firm and actually being proactive in dealing with racism globally, and particularly white supremacy. So, many of the things that Mao spoke about publicly were actually as a result of one of my influences, one of my mentors from Detroit, Robert F. Williams. He was born in North Carolina, but he was a Detroiter, and a lot of people don't know that. He was born. I think he was born in the 20s in North Carolina, but he grew up in Detroit, and he spent his time in Detroit during the race riots in the 40s. So he actually lived through the race riots in Detroit in the 40s. He moved back to North Carolina. He was part of the NAACP, and he was part of an entire faction of NAACP chapters across America that wanted to shift towards armed self-defense. And so he was defending himself against racist brutality in the Carolinas. Ultimately, he got caught up in trumped up charges of a riot and kidnapping. He fled to Cuba, and then later he moved to China. What's interesting is, Robert and his wife, Mabel Williams, both lived in China with their two sons. So you have a Black family in the 60s and 70s living in China and engaging with the government at the highest level. And he had a tremendous impact on Mao Zedong, and he was providing policy advice to Mao Zedong on how China could be helpful in addressing race problems in America. And he ultimately drafted the statement that was made by Mao Zedong, the first statement on solidarity with the African American and Black liberation struggle. So Mao Zedong makes a statement, and he reissued this statement several times, and that statement actually evolved into an annual report where China does a report on the human rights abuses in the United States. The only major power to continuously monitor the United States human rights record. And that report comes out every year in China. And that was started by a black man from Detroit. So that's a foundation. So this general concern. There have been instances, and what's really interesting, when I look to the media, you just do a Google search about the black experience in China or the African experience in China, and I was shocked. There's very little information, but you will find an entire slew of hit pieces. And I've gone over all of these articles. There are not even a lot of them. And I've started to do the background research to kind of connect the dots between who is writing them and why they're writing them in such biased ways. But every few years, a story comes out where they highlight an example which they claim is racism. They use really provocative language. And I'm scratching my head because I'm living through this. And the experience that we're told in the media is completely biased. We are not getting all of the facts. We're basically told a fallacy. And the media reporting is basically pushing a political narrative. There's a political agenda at play. And we do need to, find the nuance. One of these stories was the situation about a Wuhan exhibit. So I've been to Wuhan countless times. I'm always going to Wuhan. I got friends and family out there, loved ones. It is an incredible community that I've built long-lasting bonds with. I have a really deep connection with Wuhan, and I want to talk about those connections. But I'm going there. I know the people. It is not a racist place. They're very open-minded people. It is a place where hip-hop culture and urban culture and street culture is flourishing. I just went back to Wuhan. I think it was like 9 months after the COVID outbreak. Literally 9 months. I went, in November of 2020. So I was in Wuhan in November 2020, completely COVID-free, filming a hip-hop video on the streets of Wuhan with a Chinese Chicano biker gang. So here are these Chinese hip-hop kids that fell in love with Chicano culture, tatted up, dressed up, riding motorcycles. We're living our best life free in Wuhan. Yet you're telling me that Wuhan is racist because there's an exhibit where they're comparing black people to animals. And here is what they don't tell you about that exhibit. Here's what they don't tell you about the background story. So first, they make it appear to be that the government put on this exhibition and that the government sponsored this really hateful, insensitive exhibit. Well, the truth of the matter is the government wasn't directly responsible. It was a public museum. There was a host organization that was responsible for putting the exhibit on. And the exhibit was meant to show, positive relationship between blacks and Chinese by highlighting various artists, Chinese and African, who were involved with Africa. And so there were many artists. I think there was at least 9 different artists that were part of this exhibit. Out of the 9 artists and their exhibits, only one was found to be controversial. Me personally, coming from an artist background, I give the person grace as an artist, and I kind of understand their aesthetic and what they were doing. And I realized that if some people didn't see the whole exhibit, why didn't you see all the other artists and what they did? Why do we cherry pick this one particular artist? And I understand why people are offended. Okay, so you see these images of African people next to animals. You don't understand what he's trying to express. You don't get the background story. You're offended. Fine, you have a right to be offended. What they don't tell you is, when they talk about China in general, the common argument people make is, well, you don't have the right to speak. You don't have the right to protest.
Yeah.
You
No
don't have
free
the right
speech.
to criticize the government.
Yeah.
And am I clear? Am I breaking up?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so they tell you you don't have a right to speak out. So what happened, black people that were offended in Wuhan actually protested. They wrote a letter. They got people to sign the letter. People called in and they complained about the exhibit. What happened? the exhibit was immediately removed. So this is a clear example, and this is the actual reality of what happens in China, where people feel offended by some type of act and they push back and something's done about it. But you never heard any of that. You never heard about the countless exhibits and flourishing of the art scene in China, where African artists, musicians are are living their best life over here. There are far more African exhibits in China than there are in the United States. Okay, there are actually more platforms for African artists to exhibit their work, uh, and they have a larger market in China than they have the United States. They don't tell you about all of these, uh, exchanges that are happening, and all these incredible artists that have launched their career. They just take that one
Yeah.
story and gaslight it. And I have more, but I'll let you jump in. Uh,
Yeah, no, I mean that's an incredible story, and those are some very interesting examples. You know, I think what's so interesting about this framing of China, you know, especially China and Africa, because China is being framed as this new colonizer in Africa, and then on the domestic side, it is being framed by the West as being particularly hostile toward African immigrants institutionally. Now, what I find so interesting is that the US and Western establishments, they are so deeply racist that they cannot fathom China as being a country where people, individuals, have varying opinions that really do depend on your class experience, your history, you know, growing up in China over generations. You know, the revolutionary experience in China is what now, 76 years old, right? So, well, no, that's no 73 years old, after this year, in 2022. So it's just so interesting how, you know, when I was in China, you meet a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. But the government, the central government, the Communist Party of China is very clear, very disciplined. And as you mentioned, the people of China themselves are very active. I mean, the netizen community in China is, I mean, it's nothing like here, man. People here in the United States, they don't understand what it's like to like assert your opinion, like in China, where people's opinions are actually taken very seriously. Unlike here in the United States, where if you have, you know, a mass sentiment around something, Twitter or something else is likely to just censor you, likely to just remove you. While in China, if netizens make a huge deal about a certain problem that's going on, it's likely the government is going to respond, and pretty swiftly. So I think that just shows the difference between the two countries, what it's like to be in a country that has a revolutionary tradition that is now developing in this modern era, and trying to resolve some of these contradictions that have plagued China. You know, division. China was nearly carved up into pieces before the revolution, and that experience, I think, really does inform how the government, how the party, and how people react to problems within their country. While here in the United States, there isn't, you know, there is a tradition of resistance, yes, but I think that there is a lot of, as you said, projection, there's a lot of desire to like put onto China what actually the United States and its Western allies are really all about. I mean, these are literally the inventors, right, of white supremacy and imperialism. This is the arena, this is the region, this is where it all started, right? The problems that we talk about all the time. And yet, and it still continues, and it continues in some of the most egregious ways. And yet we are told China, 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 China's doing this, China's doing that, with no respect to the people who overwhelmingly support their government, but especially no respect to those countries and those peoples who see China as a friend. In Africa, I mean, there are poll after poll after poll that shows that people of African descent think of China, from the continent, think of China as very highly regarded as a partner, I mean, there's so China leads by far, you know, in terms of, as you said, exchanges, educational opportunities, leads the world by far in providing that to people, you know, of African descent from the continent. That's like, it's not even close, you know, compared to the rest of the world. So yeah, I think that's so interesting. You're into, you know, you're a hip hop artist, and you know, I interviewed a year and a half ago David West, and he talked about the explosion of basketball, which is a heavily black sport in the United States, in China. You have been in China for the duration of this explosion of hip hop. Even when I was in China, I was in Xinjiang. We get off in Urumqi, and there's these huge billboards like promoting concerts, hip hop artists, you know, in the airport. You know, I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, that's pretty interesting. Tell me about what that's been like for you, like being a hip hop artist in China, and you know, what can we learn from that?
Yeah, well, my experience with hip hop is a love of my life. Is a culture that I was raised with, and something I'm very passionate about. And I consider myself as a hip hop promoter. So I'm an advocate of the community, and a bridge builder and a community builder. And so I'm a bit of a hip hop activist, if you will. So I spend a lot of my time actually organizing hip hop events, and building community, recruiting people, sharing my knowledge of the culture, empowering people, bringing artists from the United States, from my hometown, to China. And man, I could talk for hours about that. Like I'm considered one of the pioneers and godfathers of hip hop in China. Been doing it for 22 years. The journey has been incredible. Um, it is taking me from doing just underground shows in Shanghai, in the rec rooms of offbeat, off the beaten track shopping malls, to actually organizing over 400 events in a year,
Mm.
across over 60 cities. Like that experience alone, I could just talk for days about traveling all over China and organizing massive events to upwards of like 40,000, 60,000 people, all based on
Wow.
the work that we've done in the hip hop community. It is mind blowing. Like some events, uh, the b-boy events, you might get 10,000 people to come out, and actually all 10,000 are b-boys. They're actually hip hop practitioners. So
Mm.
if you want to talk about opportunity, I've seen no barrier to my dream, to fulfill my dream with hip hop in China. Absolutely no racial barrier or discrimination. If anything, there's been positive discrimination where I've been given an advantage. But
Mm.
um, I mean, yeah, I really do need to kind of just like tell that story in depth. But she's like 22 years. I mean, there's a
You should write a
documentary.
book. You should write a book
Um,
about that, or do a documentary about that. I feel like that would be incredible to do something like that.
it's taken me to over 60 cities. I've been able to connect and build with the people. Every city I go to, I build genuine relationships, long-term relationships with people. So I become one with the people. I think that's what distinguishes me from some typical Westerner who may just come to China just to make money, just to get something and leave and not have something to contribute, and not want to build a genuine relationship with the people. So I've organized, from distance, rap battles in Xinjiang. I work with all the ethnic minorities, um, for decades and decades, empowering people to express themselves with hip hop, this art form where you have unlimited freedom of speech. I actually do rap battles, freestyle rap battles. You take a microphone and you say whatever you want, and people have said everything, across the political spectrum. There's definitely criticism of what's going on in their society, frustrations with different issues, ethnic tensions, economic situations, economic inequality. People aren't afraid to talk about anything, especially when you give them a mic and a platform. And I've been
Mm.
able to connect with all sectors of Chinese society, from the working class to the underclass, from the elites to the well-off, to people even involved with, the gray economy or the black market, from the streets, the underground. So I've had a chance to meet this community and build bridges and learn with them. And they have done nothing but show me tremendous love and support and respect. They embrace the Black community. They embrace Black culture. They stand with us and fight with us when we have our issues. When Black Lives Matter, was taken off in the United States, there was a lot of support in China. There were a lot of artists putting up the hashtags and speaking out on it. The state media gave it light and continues to give light. So what you find is, and the other side of the story, I'm not alone. There's a large community of Black Americans in China that are living their best lives. We are happy. We're safe. We don't have to deal with the violence. We don't have to deal with the crime. We don't have to deal with people trying to kill us or intimidate us. And we have much more economic opportunity and prosperity. So we have access to really good healthcare. We have access to incredible education. There are more English-speaking Africans enrolled in school in China than there are English-speaking Africans in the United States of America. That is just something that is mind-blowing. There are more Africans coming to China to get university degrees, masters and PhDs in engineering and medicine than we have in the United States. So China is literally training the best and brightest of the Black world right now. And that's something most people don't know. They're oblivious to. So that's why it was really upsetting when, CNN, Quartz, who else? QZ.com, ABC or CBS, they all reported on the situation in Guangzhou, and they did it in such an inflammatory way where they didn't give you the reality and nuance of what was happening. Actually, Guangzhou, the city, is a model of success. Guangzhou is the model of success of African, Asian, Chinese, Black relationships. It is the largest community of Africans in East Asia. And so if you really want to highlight the positive stories, all the Africans that are there that have made good lives, look at all of the wealth that was created, all of the trade that was created, all of the positive exchanges, talk about that. But what they did was they took a really unfortunate situation, and here's something that people don't know. In the media, you can look up, they'll report on Guangzhou as having 150 to over 300,000 Africans in Guangzhou. And that number always baffled me because we don't have an actual census of how many Black people there are in China in general. We just know which nation that you come from. And there's no one actually doing this documenting of the actual population. Well, when COVID broke out, the government listed the official number, and the official number was around 12,000 Africans in Guangzhou. That is a huge disparity. And this is something that we know that Guangzhou has always had, or recently in the past few decades, an illegal immigration problem. It is a real problem. And it is a problem that was tolerated because it generated, it had a more positive effect than it had a negative effect. But illegal immigration is still illegal immigration. And there was a pushback. There was a community in Guangzhou. Let's say, the business community is benefiting. Local renters are benefiting. And there's a great economy of people that benefit from all of these Africans by providing housing and food and resources for them. They're making money. They're happy. But some local people who are not connected, from that aren't involved with trade, they see the immigration problem, they see some of the negative consequences, and they're going to be upset. And so I think here's where we have a legitimate case for sentiments of racism and anti-Black sentiments in the local community. And when COVID broke out, there were several things that happened that conveniently the Western media didn't mention, that there was actually some really high-profile social media cases where African, a few, just a handful, but that's all it takes. I guess social media is social media, where you have a couple Africans that were violating the COVID restrictions, the quarantine, and some of the rules, and they were caught on camera doing that. So they were hanging out, partying, they were going to the club, they were bringing people back to their house every night, and someone, put that online. That got people upset. Then there were some Africans that refused to do the testing. They were found in areas that there was an outbreak and there's mandatory testing. And one African literally was in a hospital and he bit a nurse. So he attacked and bit a nurse, and that went viral. And so you have these viral incidents where there's kind of this fear and backlash towards the African community. And then you have strict rules where you can't house people. And that's what the media exploited. But what they didn't tell you is, again, the protest that happened when we did see local community, local businesses putting up signs discriminating against Africans. We saw heavy-handed, kind of rounding up of Africans didn't have their paperwork and housing in place. And we saw a response from the African leadership, the African community, and the Black community in China. And we got a swift and immediate response from the government. The Chinese local government and the central government responded with a series of policies to ensure that no one would be discriminated against and people were being treated fairly. They literally went and paid the hotels and paid the meals of those affected migrants. They passed a series of anti-discrimination laws. They spent weeks going around to all the restaurants, landlords, and taxis that were saw discriminating. They posted signs everywhere. They implemented new regulations, and they had a zero tolerance policy for racism and discrimination in Guangzhou. They also made sure they went around to all of the students and businesses to have roundtables and discussions that they publicly broadcast of African leaders, African students talking about the issues and talking about solutions. So you never get that side of the story. You never get that nuance. You just get China bad. And what I did in my research, I started to find some of these, like I'm looking at the actual journalists that are writing these stories and who they're connected to. And I found that many of them are linked to these think tanks that you mentioned before. So, yeah, you got these think tanks funded by the military industrial complex, with bias in the narrative.
Yeah, telling the world that China is the racist country, right? When the military industrial complex would not even exist were it not for the brutal campaign of enslavement, genocide, and white supremacist terror that really is at the root of the United States. And I think that case that you described, I remember that during the pandemic, right? Because it was going viral in the West and in the United States. This case in Guangzhou, and Guangzhou is a very interesting city. I mean, it has been one of the most, even during China's most perilous period, right? The Century of Humiliation. Guangzhou was one of the few cities. It was like considered a port mega city at that time. It was captured by the British, during the Opium Wars. It has a very interesting history, a long legacy, a revolutionary history in a lot of ways too. And so the fact that Guangzhou is now the home of this sort of byproduct of reform and opening up, as well as the general revolution of cooperation with African people goes both ways. We provide opportunities for Africans on the continent, and Africans have the opportunity to come here and also benefit from those opportunities. The fact that China has come that far, I think, is incredible. And I think it should give pause to anyone in the United States, in the West, about what it really means to go on a path of real, genuine human progress and struggle in the era of imperialism, especially amid a period where the condition of Black people in the United States is just horrid. I mean, it is despicable. I don't have to tell you this, Dana, being from Detroit, but I feel like there's a lot of denial about this, even after the Black Lives Matter rebellions, the Black Rebellion 2014, 15, and 2020. There is still this denialism that goes on, especially in establishment politics, where there's almost a referendum on the Black Lives Matter movement, whether race exists or not. Like we're at this place. We're at this place of, does racism exist? Is it a problem? Even on the left, I have to have these discussions. Class struggle does race matter? Oh, it's just there to divide. It's just a neoliberal thing. It's identity politics. And it drives me, I mean, as an Asian American who grew up in the United States, it drives me wild, because not only did I grow up, in and around Black communities, but racism is a widespread problem, and it is a weapon of capital. And to not be able to learn from the Chinese experience, I think, does a real disservice, because China had to go through its own struggle against Western imperialism. The Century of Humiliation was essentially Western imperialism destroying China, along with Japanese imperialism and fascism as well. But nonetheless, before I get back to you, Dan, whatever you want to comment on that, for those who are here, please do like this stream, share it, and of course support the show at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. Don't forget to subscribe as well to the channel. But yeah, Dana, back to you. I want to hear your comments. Anything comes to mind?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to quote you, like to piggyback on what you're saying. I got a quote from Danny Haiphong. It says, "Africa was the heart of darkness. Asia was yellow peril. Imperialism has for centuries used racism to justify expansion, and its requisite violence. Anyone parroting U.S. establishment narratives against nations terrorized by the U.S. are only helping the cause of imperialism." And I think that what I'm realizing is, for different reasons, for domestic political reasons, whether it's affiliation with the Republican Party, affiliation with the Democratic Party, and some of the Black groups that they're connected to. The Democrats have a huge influence on Black Lives Matter. The Republicans are starting to have a huge influence on ADOS. Black people are now more common to parrot the U.S. propaganda, the U.S. narrative. There's very little pushback, and we buy into it, and we believe that, like, we're pushing the truth. And this is a very dangerous situation, because all of my leaders, from Malcolm X to W.E.B. Du Bois to the Black Panthers, if you actually read what they had to say about China, everything that they said then in the 60s and 70s stands today. If you go to Revolutionary Suicide and you read the chapter by Huey P. Newton on China, he saw what I'm seeing today. If you look at the trip that W.E.B. Du Bois took with his family to China, and the many things that he talked about China still stand today, but for some reason we've forgotten them, or we haven't studied them. We don't even know that W. Du Bois spent a large part of his latter life in China. His wife, Shirley Graham Du Bois, literally passed away while living in China. And the connections that our leaders had to China. And there's so many Black people coming over here doing incredible things, building the relationship. Right now, in the current political climate, it's not cool to be connected with China. And they're actually, what I'm seeing is a lot of hypocrisy, because these same critics that attack China in the Western media, I know for a fact, living over here, they're all doing business and they're engaging with China. They're behind the scenes, engaging, developing with the Chinese community, taking part in this, miraculous scenario that we have, which is, the growth of the Chinese economy and the flourishing of society over here in the East. And so they're taking part in it. Yet they're telling our people, don't get with it. Don't deal with them. The Chinese are racist. This is clear divide and conquer tactics. And what needs to take place is more Black people need to get involved with China now more than ever. You shouldn't take, these people's advice, face value. You need to know. You need to know for yourself. You need to have the connections on the ground. You need to get with your people over here now more than ever. now that we're seeing this kind of aggressive push towards war. It's only, working against our own self-interest. I know there's a sister, Dr. Goddess, and she brought out a really profound point. She said that blacks in America have fought in every major war since the founding of the United States of America. We fought on every war, and we fought on every side. We fought on every side of the war.
Yes,
And
that's true.
to think that there are black people over here in China, part of the struggle, part of the community, willing to push back and fight against white supremacy and white racism. Right now, white supremacy from this side of the planet is looking like a joke. You're not going to hear this narrative from the United States, but no one is even worried or thinking about white supremacy here in Asia and China. All the threats, the posturing rather, the chest beating, really the West isn't doing anything but trying to paint a narrative of China as being evil, but they actually pose no threat to China right now. So if anyone is in a position and who's also been victimized by colonialism and white supremacy and is in a position of power to finally put the nail in the coffin and wipe white supremacy off the face of the earth, it will be the People's Republic of China. And so it will be wise for our people to have genuine connections with the people on this side of the planet and don't let some third party come in between us. And so with that said, I've done my part in the hip hop community and bringing hip hop artists from my hometown, Detroit, the legends that I admire, just inviting them to China and bringing them to China, not for profit, just so that they can see, for culture exchange, to have people-to-people exchanges. I brought Royce 5'9", the legendary Detroit rapper.
He's like my favorite too.
That's my all-time favorite. So I brought the homie over here with his brother Kid Vicious and Kino, and I brought him to China, and we did shows in Shanghai and Beijing, and they had an incredible experience. I brought Jessica Care Moore, the legendary poet from Detroit, and her son King to Shanghai to do poetry events and to perform at music festivals. I brought Marv One, the legendary battle rapper from Detroit who literally battled Eminem in an 8 Mile movie, over to China so he could see it firsthand. I was able to be part of bringing Jay Electronica over to Shanghai and Beijing and perform with Iron Mike artists. And it works both ways. Before the outbreak, I was bringing Chinese artists to the United States. I brought a group of 4 rappers from China, from all across China, for their first time ever in the United States, so that they could see it and they can explore and see firsthand for themselves. We went to Detroit, we went to Los Angeles, we went to San Francisco, we spoke at universities. We were part of a Detroit Chinatown festival in my hometown, where the Chinese community, is trying to build a Chinatown in Detroit so that we can have good relationships with Chinese people. So Chinese people can feel safe in America. They can have their own community base. And what's good about the Detroit Chinatown, it's black owned. It's part black owned. It's black and Chinese. You had it's multicultural. It's multiracial. You had a Chinese dude from Wuhan, an African American brother from Detroit, a Caucasian dude, all got together and said, let's build this Chinatown. Let's make this festival. Let's create a space where we can build bridges. And when the pandemic hit, ironically, my little brother from Wuhan in Detroit is on the ground providing free PPE and free resources to the citizens of Detroit. And he had to do so in a climate where the media, was ridiculing him for wearing a mask. Even though he's out giving out free masks, people are looking at him, scoffing at him, and don't even see like the aid work that's being done. So there actually are a lot of a number of organizations that are committed to positive U.S.-China relations, but we don't have a strong Black China organization, and that's something that's missing that needs to be established immediately. And so this is something I'm talking with the Black community here in China, of which there are many people doing extremely well. Like, I don't even get into my life experience and brag about all the amazing things that I've done. I'm pretty low key and humble with that. But had tremendous success from being a business owner to, having my own company with 15 employees, multi-million-dollar business, servicing clients at the highest level, doing national campaigns all across this country, have an entire career, and there's other people like me. There's a young couple from Philadelphia, a Black family with 2 kids, very young. They're in their 30s, and they've got multiple businesses. They have a PR company. They have a sports marketing firm. Their kids are doing well in school, with some of the best education in the world here in Shanghai. I know so many Black success stories. The story of Stephon Marbury and what he's done
Yeah.
to impact the people.
Incredible.
I can go on and on and on across this country, like people that we don't know about that are doing well, flourishing, happy, being.
No, I think we lost you. I think we lost Dana for a hot minute. Oh, sorry.
No, I passed the mic.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I passed the
No,
mic
I
back to
mean,
you.
no, I think that I think people need to hear this. I mean, I grew up on Royce's music, so to hear, I remember you told me that a while ago, having him and his brother out there, that must have been incredible. And what you say about there needs to be more of these exchanges between Black America. I would say anyone, Black America has a long history of internationalism. I mean, it was really the Black radical tradition that politicized me. You brought up Huey Newton before. It was his work and all of the incredible advances he, as well as so many others, made in the Black community around this question of internationalism, which got me thinking about China and Vietnam and Marxism and all of these things, because not many people know that you kind of briefly mentioned it, but the Black Panther Party visited China before Nixon's first talks to normalize relations with China, right? Like that. It is that tradition, that very advanced tradition of building solidarity across borders against imperialism, which is, first of all, just lacking in general in the United States and the West. But a big reason for that is because there's been such a concerted effort to denigrate and repress that struggle through state violence, through repression, and through propaganda, which we've gone over so deeply today. I mean, the propaganda is just everywhere. The fact that even here in the United States, all of this huge rise in anti-Asian violence, it's really anti-China violence, because all of the violence is kind of predicated upon this anti-China narrative and the white supremacy behind it, this yellow peril behind it. But the way that the media frames it, it's a Black Asia issue. It's a Black Chinese issue. It's a Black Asian issue. Black people are attacking Asians on the street, and that is how people are understanding it. When nothing further could be nothing that there could be nothing further from the truth than that. But this is kind of the point where we're starting from, and so it's always really, I think it's really important that, and I would love to have you on again with other folks, have a roundtable. I think here on this channel, we can bring Margaret Kimberly on to co-host, to just talk about this reality, the fact that there is kind of a material basis, I think, that China is laying, regardless of, there's the reform and opening up. Every leftist in the United States who's anti-China, they have this huge critique of reform and opening up in China, right? It's a lot of, all of it is dogmatism. But one of the things that China is doing through developing the way that it is, building bridges through the Belt and Road Initiative, we just had the FOCAC conference, and the China-Africa relations are stronger than ever. All of these developments and all of the advancements China has made in production and technology, with a socialist economic base and a communist party at the leadership, which is wildly popular, wildly disciplined, and really doing a lot of work to even further strengthen its effectiveness. What it is doing is exactly what you said, Dana. It is laying the basis for the decay of imperialism, white supremacy to reach the final conclusion. And China would never frame it. The leadership would never frame it like that. But the material reality is that the stronger China becomes, it's an inevitability at this point. There's no arresting that short of a nuclear situation spurred by the United States. But China's ongoing development, the fact that that its strength is only going to grow, its influence is only going to grow. It's a country of 1.4 billion non-white people, and which includes the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Africans in China, as well as all the various other folks in this huge globalized country. The fact that a quarter of the world's population is going to be really leading by example the rest of the world out of the mess that imperialism has left, that just in and of itself is going to bring, I think, not only progress to the world, but also what I think a lot of people in the United States want, which is real transformative change. But we can't really get there until we ourselves address the contradictions and antagonisms that are so inherent in our system. But yeah, we're about almost at the hour. Any closing thoughts? I'll stay on, folks, for another 15-20 minutes to take any questions and whatnot. But yeah, any closing thoughts, Dana?
Well, I think that I came on. I got pretty involved in the anti-Asian hate community. In Atlanta, we had the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
7 people, I believe, Asians died. Actually, one of them was Chinese, and we found her relatives in Guangzhou, and we raised money for her family here in China. I will say that, there are anti-Asian sentiments in the Black community. It does exist. Those tensions, I think they characterize higher nature of the whole community, but we can't deny that some of the voices pushing for hatred and fear to Asians don't exist in the Black community.
Oh yeah.
And this is one of the tragedies that I see happening in America, that people are getting caught up into it, into like white supremacist narratives and jumping on the anti-Asian bandwagon. And you look no further than Candace Owens. I don't even know what she was talking about. She made some quote about Biden and something about Biden sold out to, he did something just because of China asked him to do it. Something crazy like that. Little comments like that feed into the psyche, as well as Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is running for office, a Black man, ex-football player, and he says that the Chinese Communist Party is behind Black Lives Matter. And he makes these allegations that there's some connection, that they're funding it and they're backing it. So these narratives are coming up from, some of the most extreme right-wing communities. But like you said, even on the left, people are very uninformed about China. So I do want to leave with a quote, one of my favorite quotes from W.E.B. Du Bois. And he said this decades ago, and it remains true to this day. He said, perhaps our most unforgivable deed today is our attitude toward China. We hate China. We propose to never forgive the Chinese. We count them outside humanity. We charge them with every crime we can invent. And that is what is happening right now. There are lies being spread about what's happening in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, countless issues about China. Every day, they're being bombarded in the media with disinformation and misinformation. And it's not going to change until people in direct connection with people on the side. So that's the best advice I can give. Reach out to people in China. Find a friend in China. Make a connection so that you can get a different a channel of information. It's imperative. So thank you for having me on the show. I'm very appreciative for all the work that you do. Just spreading the message, getting it out there is difficult work. I just want to applaud you and encourage you to keep going, keep fighting. In the information age, I think that more people will catch on and we can push back against this massive disinformation campaign that we're all caught in the midst of right now.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, no, I mean, salute to you and all the work that you've done and continue to do out there. I really look forward to building more bridges. This COVID thing really threw a wrench in all of this. I had a lot of plans. I was like, you know what? If I get any money at all, I'm spending it on trying to develop these relationships, these exchanges at a political level, because as you said, Dana, we're in this very dangerous moment. The United States' misinformation campaign, its new Cold War, is very dangerous. And it's dangerous in the sense that it both risks, I mean, nuclear World War III kind of scenarios. It prevents us from addressing real legitimate problems like white supremacy, like climate change, like capitalism, like all of these very foundational problems. But it also prevents us from seeing hope and from seeing in the future and from learning from those who are engaged in a revolutionary process. That is, I think, one of the huge, if not the number one goal of a Cold War, which is what we're in right now. A Cold War, the first and the new, the old and the new, was really all about preventing revolution, preventing people within the imperialist world orbit from being able to join in solidarity with their uh, class brethren, their oppressed brethren around the world. And so, yeah, no, I really appreciate all that you do. And yeah, anywhere that you want to plug before you go?
No, I'm good. Just look
All right.
out for the Iron Mike. And I'm for people that want to find me, I'm actually not hard to find. So if you're looking for Dana, aka Showtime, look out on social media if you're trying to plug and connect. You can find me on Twitter at the Iron Mike or Instagram on Iron Mike. But I'm a pretty accessible person. It's Dana Showtime. You can Google me and find out more information. If you want to tap in, feel free. Please do.
All right. Well, we'll be in touch. Take good care. I'm going to stay on, everyone. So stick around for about 15, 20 more minutes. Peace out, Dana. That was a really good conversation. I'm just going to get really, I'll be on for 15 more minutes. Thanks to Dana once again for a really incredible hour. Um, I, uh, I really enjoyed that. I mean, I've been in touch with him through social media for quite a while, and so he really gave a master class on what it's like to be black in China, and also commentary and analysis on the situation, why black people, why all people who are interested in a more just world, in a new world, should be interested in China and in peace with China, but also in the things that China is doing. And hip hop, basketball. But I mean, for me, politics are what really drives my interest in China. But at the same time, there is, culture and economic development. All of this is related to politics, right? We can't separate any of these things from each other. And so it's always great to talk with someone who has direct firsthand experience with the I mean, I was there for about 2.5 weeks, and I was able to kind of feel a little bit of what Dana's experienced for 22 years. And I think it's always good to get that message out. But for everyone who's on this stream, I want you to go to the description. First, I want you to like and share this stream. Second, I want you to go to the description and register for our Summit for Socialist Democracy that Friends of Socialist China will be holding December 11th. It's an early morning, 9 a.m. start. I'll be speaking. We'll have Layla Brown of All Africa People's Revolutionary Party. We'll have Luna Oy. We'll have academics and experts from Cuba, from China, and elsewhere. We're going to be talking from Korea. We're going to be talking about socialist democracy, the differences between socialist and capitalist democracy. Carlos Martinez and I, who's also a co-editor of Friends of Socialist China. We have an article being published, an academic article on this subject. And it's a very important one given that the Joe Biden administration is holding the Summit for Democracy, which is really a farce. So I want you to register for that event. First and foremost, of course, like this stream, share this stream, subscribe if you have not. And, it's a holiday season and I am going to plug. So please do, if you're new here or if you're old here, please do, if you can, support my work at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong in whatever amount. But I just want to talk for a few minutes. There are a few things to speak about. First, yes, the Summit for Democracy is coming up. The Biden administration, the State Department, they are going to be leading it. They're going to be talking about authoritarianism, of course, which is just a dog whistle for China and all of the countries that the United States doesn't like. And it's really going to be a show. And this comes on the heels of a lot of recent developments, propaganda talking points that I've been covering. We've seen the whole Ennis Cantor phenomenon. Now he's changed his name to Freedom as this sort of American exceptionalism on steroids. And we also saw the Peng Shuai scandal, this nothing burger of a story, this basically an attempt to turn China or to recreate a sort of DPRK, North Korea story for China in order to slander it in the lead up to what has actually happened as of today, where Washington, the Joe Biden administration, has announced that it's not going to be sending political officials to the Beijing Winter Olympics this February. What's very interesting about this is that it's related to the Peng Shuai story. Peng Shuai, she was reported missing. She was supposedly posted about being sexually assaulted. If you read the transcript, she was actually posting about an affair with a former premier of China, Zhang Guoli. But that's neither here nor there. What ended up happening was the WTA, the World Tennis Association, suspended its activities in China. It won't have any tournaments in China, but this negates the fact that China wasn't actually holding tournaments with the WTA at this time and hasn't done so since the COVID-19 pandemic. And now we have an even bigger move that was kind of laid. The basis for it was laid by Cantor, by the Peng Shuai scandal, by earlier in October during the lighting ceremony. We've had these NED organizations like the Students for Free Tibet and others that have really hyped human rights and these propaganda talking points we thought were dead after the Associated Press admitted that Xinjiang is in fact not the center of genocide and all that. We thought this human rights propaganda, this humanitarian interventionism propaganda was dead around China, but it was not. And it has actually led to these very hollow moves, these very insignificant moves in terms of their material impact, but they're significant in that they push forward this aggressive imperialist campaign against China. And so today, the Biden administration has announced that political officials, who were never going to be invited anyway, are not going to go to the Beijing Winter Olympics. It's their loss. The Beijing Winter Olympics are actually going to be pretty dope. I don't know if you have seen it, but there have been journalists in China sharing about how the games will be 100% powered by renewable energy, and that actually a lot of the facilities that they are using is actually going to be renewable, also in the sense that it's a lot of the same equipment and facilities that has been updated from the 2008 Summer Olympics. So China is really doing its part in a whole lot of ways here. There's always, of course, concerns around Olympics, right? There's concerns about the Sochi Olympics. I think what was that, 2014? In Russia, there's always been concerns about the Olympics when they're held in other countries because there's concerns about environmental degradation, class exploitation, all of this displacement. I would really like to see an analysis of this after the Beijing Winter Olympics, given the fact that China is actually going in an opposite direction than much of the global South, but including much of the world, the Western world in particular. Living conditions are vastly improving. And the Communist Party of China is really on this very impassioned campaign to enact common prosperity, which is really just a euphemism for strengthening the socialist base of the society as there is this rebalancing from reform and opening up, right? We had the wild 90s. Dana kind of talked about it, that, inequality was allowed to develop in some respects, especially around income. And now there is this uh, attempt to address these things as part of the overall trajectory of the Communist Party, of the revolution. It's not just some turn left. It's not just Xi Jinping is just some leftist. When I was in China, everyone described Xi Jinping as a moderate, right? Because ideologically, China, politics in China are very interesting, very diverse. And I should share with all of you, I don't have it up, but the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences actually has an article about the dominant ideologies in China, from neoliberal to nationalism to liberal to far left, ultra left, and then you have the various strands of the Communist Party and the ideological divisions there. It's a very interesting society, and it's one that is a byproduct of both the old and the new. This is what Karl Marx talked about, and Dana kind of reflected this in what he was saying about hip hop, about the transformation in China, about how even a place like Guangzhou has changed. The even the incident around the African migrant issue, immigration issue, all of this is a byproduct of the old and the new. That's what revolutions are. Revolutions inherit the old while aspiring and also building something completely new. That in socialism is about, of course, overthrowing the bourgeoisie, overthrowing the ruling class, really transferring the means of production from that oppressor class to the oppressed, under vanguard leadership of, and it always has been, a communist party, and dealing with the contradictions, the class struggle that continues, because under socialism, the class struggle is still there. We see it in China, right? China is, with the Evergrande situation, with the regulations on Alibaba and these bigger private companies, right? You see that class struggle still exists, and that China has always said that this reform and opening up, but also just the trajectory of China in general was going to be about building a capitalist base in order to develop the productive forces so that socialism could really thrive. It wasn't allowing capitalists to control the society, so to speak, to control the state, but it was about allowing capital and capitalism to be an overall function for socialism, and to do that in a hostile world system, the Sino-Soviet split, all of these things that have happened over the decades of China's own particular socialist process, I think is not only fascinating, but so important to learn from and to study deeply, because all of it informs why the United States is on this rampage. All of it informs why we need to challenge white supremacy, yellow peril, new Cold War racism, this humanitarian interventionism. It is China's ability to survive the shockwaves of imperialism over the past several decades, which has finally told the West and the United States that there is no hope for liberal democracy in China. There is no hope for a Western government, a Western style government in China. The masses of people in China are for the revolution. They're for the central government, for the Communist Party of China. Even Harvard Ash Center and Western mainstream pollsters have done research on this. One of the few things that they'll actually do research on in China is public opinion about the government. But nonetheless, this is a really important moment. And I hope Dana's conversation with me and the Socialist Democracy Summit on December 11th is part and parcel of this process and this journey that I'm on, to try to provide that voice where it is just so painstakingly obviously absent, right? We don't have a lot of this conversation going on the left. I even saw in my chat, people want to ask me about COVID vaccines. I'll tell you my opinion on COVID vaccines, everybody. I am for real, legitimate public health responses to COVID-19. I've been like that since the beginning. I was screaming, kicking and screaming before to people in my circle. I was saying, look, we got to really learn from what China did. And the United States, of course, did the opposite, demonized China's pandemic response, which has been wildly successful. Well, uh, uh, basically supporting the capitalist class, propping them up, siphoning wealth to them, allowing people to die. And now we have this confused COVID vaccine versus no COVID vaccine, lockdown versus no lockdown. I am against anything that hurts working class people, but I am for anything that will help protect and preserve human life. And we just don't have that response, right? So I'm vaccinated. I will continue to do that because I don't want to, I want the protection. I don't want to get COVID, and I'm still very careful. I don't want to give it to anyone else. So my opinion about COVID is that we should not be engaging in these very partisan debates about singular public health measures. But if we are serious on the left, we should be talking about the overall response that we need still, that we're not getting, and we should be targeting those who are preventing us from being able to get this thing under control. Because all I hear now is COVID's here forever, COVID's here forever, COVID's here forever. And regardless of whether that's the truth or whether it's not the truth, because I don't think we know, my opinion about it is that we should be talking about a socialist model for what it means to respond to a pandemic. And we should still be talking about that. And that is, I don't get into this vaxxer, anti-vaxxer thing because I feel like that is a huge distraction from the overall fact that we live in a completely decrepit, gutted out neoliberal capitalist economy, which does not even possess any kind of infrastructure to deal with a problem like this, or let alone any other problem that afflicts working class people in the United States and around the world. So, that's really my opinion on that. And so I generally don't even get into this because I feel like there is such I get it. This pandemic has gone on forever. There's been complete government ineptitude, if not utter violence toward people during this pandemic, leaving people out to die like it always does when there is a crisis. And I get it. There's a lot of feelings, and people have gone every which way about this. But I can tell you that my opinion will always be I am for any measure. If you want to get the vaccine, not get the vaccine, I would say get it to protect yourself. I would say get it. Um, but I am very much against the vaccine hoarding. I'm very much against how the US has used COVID as a chip for imperialism. And I am of course, I'm against people losing their jobs over COVID-19 restrictions. But I'm also against the fact that uh, it is capital which is dictating not only the piss poor response, but also the politicization of the virus. Like that to me is the bigger problem. If we had a central government, if we had a government that protected the human life of people, then a lot of these debates that we're having actually probably wouldn't be happening right now. That's how I feel about it. And I really hope that we can continue to struggle on a real class basis, not on a COVID basis, not on a vaccine basis, but on a class basis, on the material realities afflicting working class people. And I assure those, um, if anyone has lived an ordinary life, COVID is just one aspect of this. It's a huge aspect. It's completely changed the way things are done in the United States and the rest of the world. And we have seen how we cannot even have a discussion right now about universal health care, about socialism, about what it means to actually what does public health even mean? It just doesn't exist here. So, I don't get into all of it because I find that it really drives toxicity. I'm more interested in the politics, class struggle. Let's talk about, if you want to talk about the politics of COVID, you want to talk about how the ruling class completely not only neglected but exploited it for their own aims. I'm all for that. But in any event, I want to just say, if you're just coming on here, please like, subscribe, share. This is kind of my little after hours thing. I'm not going to do questions today. I did say that people can email me questions, people can DM me questions. The best way to reach me, of course, where I'll be the most responsive is on patreon.com/DannyHaiphong. And I do, it's a holiday season. I'm trying to build up a bigger base of support. There's, unfortunately, some mounting costs, things that I need to kind of take care of. And so I have been trying to go harder. I think I'm going to launch a Substack later in December with the help of a subscriber who's been very generous with his advice and time. And I'm going to try to get that done. So please, if you can, subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/DannyHaiphong. But nonetheless, I've been on for about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm not a marathon streamer, everybody. I do have some things to take care of. But I will say that there are things coming up that I want you to be aware of before I go. First, of course, as I said in the description, I want you to register for the Friends of Socialist China event, the Summit for Socialist Democracy on December 11th. Yours truly will be speaking, as well as great speakers, Luna Oi from Vietnam. You may know her, the socialist YouTuber. There's also going to be folks from Cuba, Korea, and China, Cheng and Fu, and others talking about the experiences of socialist democracy in these places. And we're going to be very intentional about using the word democracy, because socialism is democracy. It is both a dictatorship and a democracy. And I think that might blow your minds, right? Because they can't exist at the same time. It is a dictatorship of the people against the oppressors, right? Because you need to have that class struggle still. You need to repress your enemies. Don't let anyone tell you elsewhere. I don't care. Libertarians, liberals, cuckster Republicans, whoever, telling you you don't need that. You need that. You need it. All revolutionary experiences show that you do need to defend the revolution. And so it is a dictatorship of the people and a dictatorship of the people and a democracy for the people. So socialism is really the fullest form of democracy that can exist prior to communism, because communism is the fullest expression of democracy in the sense that it is the abolition of all classes. But socialism is the stage where that gets worked out. And of course, it needs to be global if it really truly is to exist en masse across national boundaries rather than just within. So we're going to be talking about China's socialist democracy. They have a really interesting, and you should read some of the articles that we've been publishing as Friends of Socialist China, talking about the structure of that. Roland Bohr is a great one. He is going to be speaking. He teaches in China, and he has written a lot about China's socialist political system. And we're going to learn about Cuba's political system. We're going to be learning about Vietnam. We're going to be learning about the experience of democracy in the West, right? What is the difference, right? You have China, Vietnam, Cuba. You have these countries where living standards are improving, and yet we're told that people have no say or participation in that. It's nonsense, right? You can't have living conditions improve and have people literally have no say in that. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the farce that is this whole authoritarianism thing, when we saw literally hundreds of thousands of people, including 40,000 doctors, literally volunteer their time in China to go to Wuhan and serve the people. And that was done mainly through party organs and mass organizations. So if there's no democracy, what's that? You know what I'm saying? And that doesn't even get into the fact that the deputy model in China is far more democratic than here. Villagers, local townships vote in their representative, and then the representatives of those townships, they vote in the next level at the city, and then the province, and then all the way to the National People's Congress. So you have real representation at the National People's Congress. Literally, thousands of people across all ethnic groups, classes of people. No one has you don't have a political career. It's not your career to be a politician if you are a deputy at any level. So I think we're going to learn about that. We're going to learn about Cuba's own model. We'll learn about the DPRK. It's going to be such a good one. So please do register for that. I have, of course, a Black Agenda Report article coming out next week. I'm going to be following up on the Enes Kanter saga, his name change to Freedom. Not even going to get into that here. Read the article for next week. I'll have the speeches up. I'm going to be speaking at another International Manifesto group on China-Africa relations, and you will want to definitely check that out. I will publish that on Patreon, on my social media. So, of course, subscribe to patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. And then, of course, I think I'm going to launch a Substack because I think, I really want to center on my writing a little bit more. I've been getting a little winded by the YouTube thing, the streamer thing. So I want to focus on the writing because I love writing. I do it a lot. I do it pretty rapidly. I've kind of taken to it, and I want to do more analysis. I think that there's so much to do. There's so many interesting things to discuss and to intervene in the struggle with that a lot of people, I've been kind of sick of this COVID focus. I've been sick of this very narrow kind of like jab, no jab, or uh, vaccine, no vaccine, all this stuff about COVID. I've been sick of it. Like, no, why can't we talk about something else? So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be talking about the struggle. I want to talk about Belt and Road. China-Lao Railway just launched. It's a lot of interesting things happening around the world, people, and I think it's important that we really pay attention to them and cover it. Actually, Midwestern Marks just replied to my article on patriotism, and you can check that out on Twitter, my response to it. But I may do a longer response because it's an important debate. It's an important discussion to have. And I really want to get more into Marxism and do more of that. Maybe launch a podcast with Friends of Socialist China. So there's a lot of things on the way. With that said, all of this work is only possible through your support and solidarity. So salute to all of you. And if you're able, please do subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong or whatever amount you can. But that's going to end the stream. I appreciate all of you. Salute. Thanks for staying up with me tonight. And I'll let you know when the next episode is. I think I'm going to do some recalibrating. Got these events coming up and some plans, and then the holidays. So let's see how it goes. But of course, if you're still here, like, subscribe, share all of this. People can listen to the conversation with Dana, my after hours analysis, and our after interview analysis. And I will, see you next time, everybody. Peace out.